Talk. My name is Buffy Catella, and this week we're joined with Lisa Shea, and we're going to talk all about her many books. I'm so excited to get right into this. So, Lisa, thank you for coming onto the show today.
Well, thank you for having me.
So, what is your newest book about?
Well, I think the ones that I'm working on right now, I have a series from Set and Sutton called Aspen Allegations is the first one. So I've got aspen, birch, cedar, dogwood, elm, and fir out, and I'm working on ginkgo. So that's the next one in that series.
So, you have that series, but also you have how many? Do you know how many total books you have that you've written?
Nearly 500, and I think I have 33 series that are going.
How do
So I
you
like lots of different things.
I was gonna say, like, how do you balance that at this? I don't know how you do that at the same time, multiple series at the same time.
Well, these are easy because they're set in Sutton. And I mean, that's my boyfriend and I'm kayaking right behind him. So in essence, we'll just go for a month and document the stuff we're doing, add in a dead body or two, and then that creates that series. So that's easy and fun. One of the series is my medieval series. So I've got 15 books in this series and I love medieval England. So these are really easy. I grew up loving Aragorn from Lord of the Rings. So in essence, all of the stories are versions of me and Aragorn saving the hobbits and saving the local poor people and that sort of stuff. So all of the books that I write are things that I love and that I just put them into book form.
So, do you have a favorite, or do you have a favorite series, favorite book that you've done over your time?
I think they all appeal to me for different reasons. Like in the medieval series, I mean, I adore these because I grew up loving, like I said, Aragorn and the whole medieval environment. And my heroines are generally sword fighters, so I like that they are strong and empowered. But some of them are cute and fun stories. Some of them are the woman's been abused and is overcoming abuse. So it depends on my mood which one I'm drawn to at a given moment.
So, I'm curious, how long does it take you to write these things? Because it seems like you can write them pretty quickly. So,
I can generally write a chapter an hour. So for example, for the Aspen Allegation series, I started that one with National Novel Writing Month, which is a big project that happens every November around the world. And there's, I think, 500,000 writers or something that participate in it. But the idea is that you start November 1st, you write straight through until November 30th, and you finish up with the first draft of a book that you can then edit and publish. So I started that one November 1st. Every day I wrote a chapter. It was about an hour a day that I wrote the chapter. And by the end of the month, I had the book. Or like I have another series, the Black Cat series, which is set in Salem. One of my ancestors was died in jail during the Salem witch trials. So I'm very interested in the Salem history. And I wrote that a chapter a day. So on October 1st, I wrote the first chapter and published it. And October 2nd, I wrote the second chapter and published it as little short stories. And by the end of October, I had the entire set of stories done.
wow, so you can write very quickly. Is that what you do? Is this your full-time job, or do you have another job also on top of it?
I run websites, so I own a number of different websites, Bella Online, Wine Intro, Romance Class. So I own about 35 websites and I write all the content for them. So that's my main job, but that also involves a lot of writing. So since I'm writing pretty much all the time, I type very quickly and the writing process comes very quickly to me.
It seems like it, because I'm also a writer myself. I mostly do like screenplays and plays like that, and it takes me much longer than what you're saying. But I guess if you know it, it can just come out really easily, is what it sounds like, and that's really very interesting. And I want to know, you must be self-publishing these, right? Because how are you getting them out so quickly, or do you have a publisher?
Well, I started out writing, well, I've written all sorts of things, but I was approached by a publisher who sought my weddings and courtships books online or content online about wedding traditions in France or in Ireland or in other places. And they approached me to do a book series. And I did do a book series with the publisher. And I was so dismayed by the entire process and the way they would misedit my content to change words to words they shouldn't have been, like the whole compliment versus compliment kind of stuff. And then they took a portion of all my proceeds to pay them for the stuff that they did to the books, that I decided I was not going to work with publishers anymore. And I've had several friends who've worked with big names like Harlequin and Penguin, and they've run into similar situations. The editing is better with those guys, but they will choose covers that you hate and they will send your storyline in a direction that you disagree with because the publisher feels that it's what's hot in the market right now. So I have strongly resisted going with publishers after that experience. And I just self-publish because it's so easy just to put it up completely free, no cost involved, and then you get all the proceeds.
Yeah, so I was going to say, are you generating a lot of revenue from your books, or is it more of just a passion thing that you're doing?
Most of my proceeds benefit battered women's shelters, so I do bring in good income to support them. You can make a lot of money. I have a number of friends who make quite a lot of money doing books, and it depends on what topic area you go into. So if vampires happen to be hot, and then you sit there and you write a bunch of books about vampires, then you're riding the wave and getting a lot of interest in those. I tend to go with books that interest me. So I write about medieval maidens wielding swords, or I write about Sutton, Massachusetts, and these aren't like super hot topics necessarily. So I'm happy with the money that I get to support the cause that I'm interested in.
So how do you, I guess, get your name out there? How, because I know with a publisher, at least they do a lot of that, but when you're self-publishing with a,
Publishers are now very poor at doing marketing, and they hire authors expecting them to do most of the marketing. So the publishers will preview a potential author's Facebook page, Twitter page, Instagram page, TikTok page, and make sure that they have a good following to be able to support the things they're doing. And they're going to expect the author to go out on virtual book tours, and once we get past the pandemic, back into in-person book tours. But I have a friend who's working with a very large publisher, and they do like no marketing for her. She's the one who has to go out and do the book tours, set up the book tours, and all that other kind of stuff. So even if someone has dreams of going with a big publisher, they shouldn't expect the publisher is going to do much of the lifting for them.
I had no idea that that was the case. Obviously, this is like not my area. I talk to people all the time about this type of stuff, but I don't really know how publishing actually works because
Mhm.
it's not really what I'm interested in. But that's so interesting. I didn't know that even if you go with a big publisher, they expect you to do your own campaigning, basically. That's very interesting.
Well, and part of it makes sense. I mean, if you're Stephen King, I suppose, they put more effort into helping you, but people still would much rather hear from Stephen King's Twitter feed and follow what Stephen King is saying and all of that stuff than listening to some corporate mouth that I don't even know who represents him, but let's say it's Penguin. If Penguin puts out a release and say, oh, Stephen King's working on book 24, people will say that's nice. But if Stephen King himself puts out a post and says, oh, and I'm on book 24, I'm on chapter 3, and I'm working on this character, that gets way more attention and followers. So that's what the publishers want. The publishers want the author to be engaged with their audience.
So now you've talked a little bit about your family, or your family history, and I'm wondering, what is your story and where are you from? And how did you end up where you are now?
Well, grew up in various places in Connecticut, and then started out at Worcester Polytech, and then dropped out, got married, had a family. So I'm very local to the Worcester region, and pretty much all of my adult life I've lived in Worcester, Providence, Worcester, and then now I'm in Sutton. So I really like this New England area.
So what were you studying at WPI, and then how did, yeah, sorry, I was gonna say,
No,
how
no,
did
it's
you
okay.
end up from WPI and then you got married and then had a family and now you're a writer? So how did that process happen?
Well, I've always been interested in writing. So, like I said, I grew up reading Lord of the Rings, and at the time I had an hour-long bus ride each direction, and we didn't have smartphones or toys back then that could engage you. So I just invented all these stories. So I've always been thinking of stories and writing stories, but writing normally doesn't pay the bills very well. So I went to school for computer programming. When I dropped out, luckily the biotech was booming around here. So I started working at Cambridge Biotech and then Biogen, and they hired me right up because I'm very good with programming as well. So I was a database programmer. And because I'm a database programmer, when the web started launching, they needed a lot of database people to build the databases that build the content engines for the websites. So I got hired by 2 different companies at the same time to work from home, half-time and half-time, to build their content engines. And once I realized how easy it was for me, I said, I can make my own websites. So that's how I started building the 35 different websites that I run. So all of them have database engines that I built. I run the websites, I do the maintenance, but then I also do the writing. So it's a combination of the things I love.
So, in the vein of that, why did you want to become a writer? Obviously, you said growing up, you made a lot of stories But at what point in your adult life were you like, okay, now it's time, I'd like to start writing and doing more of that?
I think I always liked to write. And when I had these big websites, I had a larger audience with which to share my writing. So when I started the medieval things, I just posted a chapter a day on my different websites that I was running, and enough people liked it that I said, okay, I might as well compile it together and put it on Amazon. And that was right when Amazon and Lulu were launching their self-publishing options, and it was free and it was easy. So I said, hey, I've got a story that people like. I might as well just pop it up on Amazon and see what people think. So it was definitely a lot easier back then. Like when the Amazon ebooks first launched, there were hardly any ebooks out there. So I could launch a book onto the ebook market and I'd be like the only medieval romance in their entire library. So I'd get lots of people buying it. There's clearly more competition nowadays.
So you've been doing this for a long time. So when did you start? What year was that you were doing
Well,
that?
I quit my database jobs and started working from home for database websites in 2000.
Wow. So you've been doing this for a long time, like
Yep,
21 years now.
yep.
Um, so I guess what is your goal as a writer? I don't know if maybe you've already accomplished those goals after your 500 published books. I'm not quite sure. Is there a specific milestone that you'd like to reach with your writing?
No, I just like all the things I write about are things I really like to write about. So I have lots of fun creating the worlds, and then I'm just happy that people enjoy sharing them with me. So like I saw um, a show that had a story set in the Wyoming kind of area, and I didn't like how the show went, so I wrote my own version where the things ended up the way that I wanted to. So that turned into one series. uh, Blackstone Valley Mystery is set in the Blackstone Valley, and that's got a black law librarian working out of Boston who lives in the Sutton area. So just all sorts of things that strike my fancy. And actually, that one, the first sub book of that is called Rumble Strip, and it happened because my boyfriend and I were driving home and we veered a little into Rumble Strip. And I said, "Hey, what if the Rumble Strip actually had a Morse code message or something in it?" So just little things like that will spark my imagination. Then I'll say, "Okay, well, who wrote the Morse code message and why is it in there?" And then I just write the story.
So are you working on multiple books at the same time right now? Yeah.
Yeah.
So how do you choose which gets priority over another, or do you just split it up equally?
Well, it's all about the scene that's being written and what mood I'm in. So I have a series. One of my ancestry lines goes back to the Lumbee Native American tribe in the North Carolina, South Carolina area, and it was all a mix of the escaped slaves or the freed slaves mixing in with the Native Americans, mixing in with the Irish, and so on. So it was a big hodgepodge of people. And I've written that to a point where the character is trapped with a bad person and trying to escape. So that's a fairly dark scene. So I have to be in a certain kind of mood to be able to work on that. I've got another series that's set in the copper mines in Connecticut, which was a place that during the Revolutionary War they stuffed the enemies into the British, the British soldiers that they were fighting. So it was just this big hole in the ground full with mold and dripping water and everything. And when they captured people, they just stuff them down there because all he had to do was seal up the top of the mines and the people couldn't get out again. So that's also a sort of dark, dreary thing. So those two are on hold right now because I haven't been feeling dark and dreary enough to work on them. But the Sutton stuff tends to be lighter. So if I'm in a lighter mood, I'll work on the Sutton things.
I'm curious about your fan base. Do you have a dedicated fan base that do they read everything that you put out, or do you have people that are fans of certain series but don't read others?
Yeah, it's definitely a certain series. So, for example, I have a series set in diners because this is part of it. I love diners. So, this gives me an excuse to go to every local diner and visit it and then write a story about each of the different diners I go to. So, this has a girl who has Asperger's and who enjoys solving puzzles. So, she goes to each of these diners and solves a mystery. And so, that one's fun and lighthearted. And I enjoy that. And there's a certain audience who likes that kind of story and enjoys that they are gentle and light. And then I have horror stories, which are all pretty creepy and nasty. And it's a fairly different audience that likes my horror stories than likes the light Asperger's stuff. And then, I have a story set in Salem, which is a cozy witch. And there's an audience that likes the cozy witch stuff because it's magical, but doesn't necessarily like the Asperger story because it's realistic, and doesn't necessarily like the horror story because they're too creepy and scary. So it all depends.
Yeah, it definitely seems like you have a wide range of what you're writing. And I even saw you have some cookbooks or something there
Yep.
too. So
Yeah, I have.
what I guess what made you decide that you were going to write a cookbook? Is that the same type of thought process, or is that a different process than these other books?
I think again, it's that anything I'm interested in, I'll tend to write about. So I have books on yoga and meditation and journaling, and those tend to do really well because those are things that I personally like to do. So then I just write up my own practice for people to read. And the same thing with the cookbooks, they're all low sugar, low starch, trying to eat in a healthier way, hopefully. So since I'm researching those recipes for myself anyway, I just stick them together into a book and put them online.
So I guess you've kind of answered this because it depends on your mood.
Mhm.
But do you have a favorite type of book to write, or favorite, genre, or is it just really mood dependent for you?
Well, it's totally mood dependent. Sometimes in a science fiction fantasy mood. So I'll write, because I grew up watching Star Trek The Next Generation. So I have a series that's sort of like a Star Trek Next Generation feel. I love fantasy stuff. So I've written several fantasy books. But sometimes especially with the stuff going on with the pandemic, I'm more concerned about the women who are stuck at home with an abusive partner and what they must be going through and how to get them to get out of that. So then I go more heavily towards the serious types of topics.
So, yeah, how has the pandemic changed, I guess, the way that you write? Because you were already working at home before, but has
Mhm.
it made you write things differently?
I don't think so. I've always liked to work from home. And with the pandemic, I just pretty much hunkered down even more at home and barely left the house. And now I have even more time to write. I suppose, if anything, because I was so involved with trying to get the word out about issues and try to convince people to wear masks and all these things that I care about, I probably spent less time writing because I was spending more time trying to be a communicator. But I'm sure I will go back. Things seem to be easing now, so I'll go back to writing more.
You just have so much content. I'm not quite sure what else to ask you about. I don't know. Is there? I feel like we've gone through this very quickly, but I don't know if is there anything else that you specifically want to touch on or talk about related to your writing?
Well, I think I want to encourage anyone who's interested in writing to give it a try. I run 3 teen writing groups online, and I am just so inspired by these thoughts and ideas that the teens have. And right, so this is sort of political, but I will gently say that the way the world is turning out right now is not great with the climate crisis and everything else. And it happened a lot because people were complacent and just said, oh, things will work their way out somehow magically, and we don't care about the things we're doing. And I think teens, by necessity, and people your age, are much more aware that something has to be done. We can't just follow this path blindly, or we are going to end up in an even worse climate crisis. So I am very happy with how empowered teens and young adults are feeling about standing up and making a change and having their voice be heard. So I would definitely encourage anyone of any age to find the message that they want to get out there and to write it and get it out there, because Amazon is completely free. You don't pay anything at all to publish it. Twitter is free, TikTok is free, Instagram is free. So you can write the message that you think needs to be heard, and then you could use marketing to get it out there. And you don't need to have anyone else give approval to what you're saying or gatekeep the kind of message that you want to put out there.
You talked about your teen writing groups. So how did you get in? I'm curious about how you got involved with that. How did that all start?
I forget if I saw an ad. The company is called OutSchool, and they're a virtual company that anyone can sign up to teach for, and all teens can sign up to do courses for. And I run 2 adult writing groups. Well, we let teens in too, but mostly it's adults who participate in the writing groups, one set in Sutton and one set in Boston. And I really enjoy mentoring the writers in those groups, but they tend to be older people, retired aged people, which then tends not to encourage teens to join us because they see a lot of retired age people and say, this isn't a group that I feel comfortable in. So I was trying to think how I could reach teens better, because I think it's really important, like I said, for teens to get their voices out there. And OutSchool seemed like a good way to be able to reach people. But I'm sure there's other, I don't want to make this a message for OutSchool. I'm sure there's lots of other systems out there that can reach teens. And if someone is an established writer, I think it's important for them to pay it forward and to help the younger generation figure out how to navigate the publishing system and get their voices heard.
So what is the future for you looking like for your writing? Are you just going to keep doing what you're doing, or do you have a grand plan that you'd like to, I guess, reach at a certain point?
Nope, I don't have any plan other than I write the things I like to write, and I write them when I want to write them. I'm happy working on the Sutton series because I love Sutton and talking about all the local things. I love the medieval series because that's just an internal passion of mine. And all the other things that come to mind, like I said, I wrote the Wyoming series because of a particular TV show. It happened to kill off a character I loved, and I felt it was wrong. So I wrote a different version of the whole sequence where the person that I cared about lived and went forward. And I have different inspirations for writing these different stories. And some of these I'll finish up, but like the Wyoming series is pretty much finished now. But then something else will happen in my life and it will inspire a new thing that I want to tackle. One of my series was the Cinderella, Snow White, Sleeping Beauty, all of those kinds of things. And I started writing it back when it wasn't a trope to be having all these things have strong, empowered women instead of the help save me, I'm standing in a tower and some prince is eventually going to come and rescue me kind of idea. So I started them when it was a novel idea. Now everyone's writing them, so it's no longer that interesting to me. So I just have to write book 5 and wrap the series up and get it done, and then I'll move on to something else. So there's some series that fall into that thing where I was passionate about them in the beginning, and now it's at a point where I just need to finish them so that the readers have some sort of closure. But there's others that I really still care strongly about.
So before we wrap up here, do you have any, it seems like you're well versed with the online world. Do you have any social media / some of your websites that you want to plug so people who are interested in finding your books can find your books or learn more about you?
Sure. The main website is lisashea.com, so LISASHEA.com. But then I'm on Twitter and Instagram and TikTok and Facebook and Flickr and Pinterest. So I'm on pretty much all of the major things. And if you just look for Lisa Shea, you should be able to find me. But I'm happy to help people if people have questions, if people want to get, because this is a local channel. I do run the Sutton Writing Group, and it's not just for Sutton residents. It's open to anyone that wants to join in. And we're doing everything virtually anyway, so you can just pop into our Zoom chat and ask questions about what you're doing, or you can just listen in and see what other writers are working on and get some ideas from that.
Well, thank you so much, Lisa. I think this has been a pleasure. I feel like I got a deep dive into everything you've written because there's
no, don't do that.
I scrolled through Amazon a little bit. I was like, wow, look at all this stuff. This is really cool. But now I didn't realize there were this many series. Now I'm curious about all of them. So I'm going to definitely take a look. But again, thank you for coming on. This has been Book Talk, and we'll see you guys next week.